Welcome to The Passion Pod with your host, Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation.
Welcome back, friends. Today I drove over to Northeast Minneapolis, which was a little under a 2-hour drive through construction. Had to stop because I had to use the bathroom after drinking so much coffee. Finally made it to this wonderful studio, something that Eau Claire I really wish that they had, to interview a guest that I discovered through Instagram probably a year ago. I saw a Prof album cover, more than one different image from Prof, and I was like, who did this? I've never seen photography quite like this. It was really, really unique. And so this photographer was on my radar for quite a while. And then a couple weeks back, I was scrolling Instagram thinking, what do I want to do for my 12th season? And I saw Adam from 12 Vultures post a photo of himself. And it was this really cool portrait. And it reminded me that there's this really cool portrait artist somewhere in Minnesota. I need to get a hold of her. So anyways, I drove out here. I'm really grateful to be able to sit down with... Welcome to the show, Shelly. Do you pronounce it Mosman?
Mosman, yeah.
Mosman. See,
Shelly Mosman, yeah.
So
Thanks
in your
for
own
coming.
words, who are you and what are you passionate about?
Who am I? I'm a photographer that I'm stuck in this position because I really can't do anything else. I went to MCAD back in the early 90s, graduated, and I've been shooting for myself ever since. And in 2011, I went on a self-indulgent adventure, just finding my own style, and it was not planned. I had the time because at the time, digital, and there's a lot of changes in 2008, as we all know.
Yeah.
And I realized in 2011 that I've been trying to rebuild my business for 8 years. Which is actually started in 2004 for me. So 2011, I'm just like, all right, I'm just going to shoot for myself. What's that going to do for me? What am I going to do? So I just decided, who do I want to meet? And from there, I'm a portrait photographer strictly.
Wow. Who was the first person that you thought, who do I want to meet? Did you have somebody in mind at that point in time?
Well, it was local. I just
Okay.
stuck to Minneapolis because I had no idea where I was headed. I was basically walking into darkness.
Sure.
And going, all right, so who do I want to meet? I want to meet the commercial photographers here in Minneapolis. So I started reaching out to, back in the day when there was a lot of freelance photographers shooting for Dayton's and Target. And so I met those guys and women as well. And then I'm like, I'm interested in motorcycles. We have a big motorcycle scene here. I just contacted one, and it's kind of like show dogs. You meet one owner, and then you're introduced to 20 more. So
Sure.
I got a motorcycle series going. I started going to rallies. I started going here and there, and Indian. I shot for Indian for a while and their rides, and that was really fun.
Cool.
Started off with 6 people, and by the 3rd or 4th year, there was there was a line for 2 hours.
Yeah.
So
That's wild. I mean, motorcyclists are a rowdy bunch. I've been meaning to get down to Sturgis forever, and I've never done it. I ride a Harley too, and it's
I never made it to Sturgis.
I want to get down there just to experience what it's like. I know I wouldn't fit in at all. It's a different crowd. I don't really party. They're older people than me partying way harder than I'm going to ever. But I want to get down there at some point. They're an interesting looking
if you
bunch.
need characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you
So
wanna
how did
meet
it
people.
work transitioning the photography as far as still being able to pay the bills during that time? Because that's the biggest scary part for a lot of people walking away from something. You didn't walk away from photography, but you walked away from the type of clientele because you were shooting weddings and stuff, I'm assuming, because that's kind of what everyone
I did for a very long time.
Yeah. So how
in
did
the
you
beginning,
transition?
it was film. So
Oh,
I started shooting before digital cameras came around.
Yeah.
And it's 2004 when I say that is when digital cameras became very accessible, and everybody kind of quit their job or graduated high school. And I had 8 other photographers in Minneapolis, and in 2004 I had 800. Yeah. They took the bar and they put it down by my ankles.
Yeah.
So price wise. So basically it was a learning experience. So you just roll with it.
Yeah.
I'm always been freelance, so I'm used to, I don't expect a paycheck every month. And sometimes, it's the entire year. And you just say, okay, this is my time where I have time to focus on something. I need to create something. So I literally go out and inspire myself. I can't just sit and mope about not working.
Yeah.
And really, that's my own fault, because all I got to do is come to the studio, or all I got to do is pick up the camera and create something, and it just funnels and everything follows. So that is how it has been working for me.
Has that been the practice to get rid of creative block, is just start shooting even if you don't think it's going to work that day?
Yep.
Yeah, that's how it's worked for, I mean, talking to a lot of other creatives, I paint a lot. I paint murals and stuff.
Oh,
and
cool.
what I found works, well, as the best thing I found that works anyways, is to go start drawing something I don't even really want to.
Yeah.
Just because I can't think of anything. Because the type of art I do are kind of like these colorful characters that I make up. So that's the hardest part, is
I like
making
your
them
shoes,
up.
by the way.
Oh, thank you very
The
much.
ones that you decorate, yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So it's, but coming up with the idea is the hard part for me, not the execution. Is that the same thing with you now that you've been doing photography for as long as you have? Is the execution part kind of like a no-brainer, and it's just coming up with the whole concept of it?
I do, funny you bring that up, because I really do I have an image in my head, and then like this backdrop right here started in last April. There was an image in my head.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
I'm not going to say how that image came about.
Sure.
I was like, I'm going to make that photo. So now it's September, and it's finally coming around. And but also, in my place for how long? I mean, I've been shooting for like 30 years. I still just do more random things too. It's important to keep that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, give me
I
an
kind of
example.
jumped around
what do you
a
mean by
little bit.
random? Like going to take pictures of sailboats, or what do you mean?
Well, yeah, pretty much. But
Cool.
and I've done that, but
Yeah.
that was a long time ago.
Sure. Yeah.
But you really do. When I say inspire yourself, you have to just figure it out, right?
Yeah.
So I think during COVID, there wasn't a lot going on, and I have a lot of friends that collect taxidermy. And I love, like, I was inspired by these dioramas in the History Center in Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
If you've ever been downtown and you're waiting for a flight and you got like 6 hours, go to the History Museum and check out the dioramas. And they're like from late 1800s, and they're pristine, gorgeous.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, I'm going to do that. So I grabbed some of my friends' taxidermy and I started building up around him. And a friend of mine actually recreated a dodo. So that was my little one of my COVID projects. I just grabbed animals and then built a, whole scene around them and put the backdrop in, and they were like my little pets, and people liked that. I was selling it. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've never seen anything like it. So at this point, now that people have really seen all of these album covers and different shots that you do with the animals and because it's unique. If anyone's seen it, they know. Like, I've only seen one person shoot like this. Do you have a long list of clients that hit you up specifically for that type of thing all the time?
Well, it's my bread and butter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a series called Animal Child, and that started back in 2009, 10. And it was really just grabbing some curtains a friend of mine brought over, and she's like, look at this fabric. And this is like bark cloth is what they call it. And it's like they had upholstery back in the 1920s.
Yeah.
And it's a repetitive pattern. So that, I just put a friend's kid in front of it, took a photo. And we were talking about earlier, social media at the time really worked well. It was 2009, 10. 11, before the 16 election.
Yeah.
It was a good place to be. And the feedback that I would get immediately fed my energy to make more. And then I get the feedback immediately. So, I mean, it was a daily, new photo daily. And then I loved the feedback, good or bad. It just helped me grow. So, and figure out what this style became. And it became the Animal Child series.
So what do you do with all of the extra props and backdrops and everything? Because I'm assuming that you want to constantly use new stuff and find new stuff, but then you have all this other stuff. What do you do with it all?
You get a bigger studio.
Do you end up reusing a lot of props and stuff?
Yes.
Or not really? Yeah?
Yeah, you haven't seen the rest of the studio, so
No.
I have like a whole two prop rooms.
So how did it line up with Adam with 12 Vultures? Because I remember when I first reached out to you, you were like, yeah, I rented, whatever piece it was, a buffalo or whatever
a
it was.
buffalo head per prop.
Yeah. So how did that relationship develop? Did you just wander into that shop, or was this before he had a shop? How did it work out?
I met him right when he opened it, but he also had a booth with another vintage or antique store called Hunt and Gather. He worked with those ladies.
Okay.
And then he went out on his own because the guy just needs his own place. He has a really great aesthetic, and the way that he's created his storefront it's just like,
I've never been in anything like it.
it's so fun to be in.
Yeah.
And he's such a great guy. The whole experience, you just go. And sometimes I go there just to chat. I haven't been in there in a while because, summer and it gets busy. But
Sure.
yeah, he's very knowledgeable. And I just go in there and learn about the new stuff that he's gotten in. So
Sure. What's the balance like between like art show type photography where you're doing it purely for yourself? It's not commissioned, like you were talking about those series that you were doing, because I saw you'll have those displayed for like a show, versus your client list that you have to do all these projects for, that maybe even, like the some of the prof stuff or some of these other people, that's not necessarily going through your outlets. It's just going through them because you're providing that content for them. I mean, obviously your style's all over it, but you're not really taking credit for it in front of everybody at once. Like, look at what I've produced. It's more like they're putting it out. I
know. And I could take more credit. I'm just not a very good publicist.
Sure. Yeah. You like the mysterious.
No, I just actually am not very good at Instagram. I barely know how to post more than 5 photos.
Sure. Sure.
I mean, Mike, prof's manager and everything, publicist and agent, he just is so good at all that. But I probably should post some of those.
What's the balance like though with your art shows? Like how much time goes into that and versus the client side of it? How do you balance the two kind of directions? Because when you're doing something like a series just for yourself, I'm sure like you can sell prints and stuff and you can make money that way, but it's not like here's a paycheck that's ready. It's kind of the same way like I paint a lot, right? And if I'm painting some custom shoes that I don't know if they're going to sell or not. I'm just doing them out of my own pocket on my own time versus a different mural that's more commercial. And it's like, this is the dollar amount. This is the window. This
they
is
just
the
go
job.
together.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, you can do them at the same time.
Is that how you tend to do it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So sometimes it opens up a little bit. To be honest, I don't like to be super busy.
I don't think anyone does. But
I don't need to be creating constantly. And personally, I need this space to zone out.
Sure.
To think and to brainstorm. And then I need the space to I'm going to go to LA for the weekend. And I'm just going to, take 5 hours to walk up and down McKinney and chat with all the shop owners and and then go to the skate park or just go to the ocean. And I'm just going to wander with a brain full of nothing. Wow. And then come back and be like, oh, yeah, I think I need a backdrop with a desert in it. Or something, you know what I mean? And
then you find that backdrop where? Because where do you get a lot of these things?
Okay, so a friend of mine, Carter Eberbeck, and he owns Ohm Farm. This is his beginning. He's traditionally trained in Italy, making his own pigments, doing frescoes, and he's just he's a really great, incredible painter. But he also has his own business of refurbishing, reused furniture.
Oh, okay.
So he'll collect and he'll build it up and recreate it and then sell it to clients. He's an interior designer as well.
Wow. So it really is like a whole collaboration between a bunch of people to produce all these types of things. And are you buying these then almost I like to collect art for my own house, but I don't buy it necessarily for business use.
Yeah, no, my overhead used to be gear and studio. My overhead now is props.
Do you ever feel guilty about spending money on a prop where you're I wonder if this is ever going to make money up for it?
No, because that will get in my way. I can't afford to think like that.
Sure.
Nope, no room for that. I just go. You just go. Just look, eye on the ball, because I cannot be bothered with whatever. Because you mentioned earlier, to overthink.
Yeah.
I just don't.
Yeah, I think it's better just to do and then see what comes of it. And sometimes you use things, sometimes you don't, but at least you have stuff that you could potentially use versus a lot of other people. The biggest thing that gets in their way is they think it has to be perfect the first time, which it's never going to be perfect the first time.
Oh, yeah.
And so they just never do it in the first place.
I never go for perfection, ever. Because whatever it is going to be exactly what it's supposed to be. The word perfect has nothing to do with it.
Sure.
For me.
Yeah.
Because what is perfect? You know what I mean?
How many images do you usually try to come away from? Come away with from a shoot? Do you have an intention going in with that, or are you kind of just trying to get the one?
Well, it depends on the shoot.
Sure.
But lately it's one.
How many how many portraits do you have, like a goal of how many you aim to get over the course of a period of time, over a month or a 6-month time frame or anything? You just kind of whimsically go about it?
Yep.
I need to like take that into my life and just go camping and not think about stuff and be by the waterfalls. We were just talking off mic about manifestation. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think people get in their own way all the time, and they tell themselves, well, this isn't going to be good enough, so I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to be able to make a living doing this. That's a pipe dream.
The brain
and then
chatter.
It stays that way, forever.
Yeah.
How has manifestation worked for you? What's your thoughts on it?
I was going to say, you really do have to be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Because when it's in you don't even have to say it out loud. You just think it, but it's already embedded in that, and then, it could very well just stay there. So
I think for me, manifestation is just like, if you make that intent of this is what I want to do, it's just like when you're riding a bike, if you're like looking at something, that's where you're going to go. Mm-hmm. It's like just having it kind of front of mind that this is what I'm trying to do. It kind of just happens pretty naturally. Obviously you have to put energy into it, but it's just, it's kind of in the subconscious all the time of all the decisions you make, of like course correcting yourself of, well, this thing isn't helping me towards this thing I want to do, so I'm going to intentionally kind of go that direction. Versus if you have a pipe dream of like, well, I want to do this someday, you're not looking at it each step of the way of like, what's the right
really
step to get there.
To not look at it each step of the way, because you'll figure that out as you're going.
Yeah.
And just look at the end product, like, oh, this is where I want to be. And then before you know it, you're kind of like, I mean, is it cliche? You're there. Yeah. I know it sounds, it's really hard to explain.
It's funny though, because that's like the opposite of what people say. People say all the time of you got to focus on like one step at a time, and then it's not as daunting. And I kind of disagree.
Right.
I think that if you just know where you want to get, because if you're looking at one step, it's hard to understand where
your head's
that step,
looking down.
Yeah, and you just don't understand where that is going and why that one step really matters.
Right.
Like, what's the point of it? I always try to look at it's
just start walking.
Yeah, I think of it as like the little like maze games when you're a kid. My mom always told me to figure them out the fastest, you just look at the end and go backwards.
There you go.
And I guess I've always taken that mindset of, if I know what I need to do at the end, I look at it from that point and go, okay, well, so what are the main things to get there? And I kind of work backwards.
Yep. And if you give yourself the space and not focusing on one step at a time, you're giving your mind the space to look at what is being offered to you in order to get there. Because when you're looking down at your feet, you're not noticing all the opportunities that are literally being handed to you, because you already have your end game, and now you just need to look for what's being handed to you in order to get there. Because I can tell you from experience, it's never what you think it's going to be.
Yeah. Give me an example of that. What's a story of it? Because I mean, for me, there's been a lot of times where I look back on it and I'm like, I didn't realize how helpful this thing I did was. Like, I would throw skateboard contests and I wouldn't have anyone to be on the microphone. So I would just have to be on the microphone, and that wasn't intentional. I didn't want to do that. And then years later, that really is what made me comfortable talking to people on a microphone, which was super helpful. And I didn't think about it at the time. That definitely wasn't the plan.
You didn't know you had that.
Right.
Until you started doing it.
Yeah.
And it was given to you. And your head was up and you're looking around and you grabbed it, embraced it, and now you're doing it.
Yeah.
Not knowing where you're going is kind of the best place to be. And you just keep walking into that darkness, really. Because it's not a bad darkness. It's just like, oh my God, okay, well, let's see what's going to happen here, and being okay with that. Oh God, I gotta tell you, I just gave up at the time because I had like no paycheck for years. You literally, like you asked me earlier, what do you do? I was like, well, you live on a credit card.
Sure. Yeah.
And then you pay off the credit card, but you live minimal. And actually the art that comes out of living minimal is the most honest, because you're working with what you have, and it really, I think, creates an honesty and a humility and a gratitude within the work that resonates with everyone.
Yeah.
So the more money you have, necessarily not the better work you're going to make.
Yeah, I think that humility helps. Honestly, the biggest life lesson, or one of the biggest life lessons I ever got, was taking a huge pay cut personally. When I worked in the corporate world, I worked for Verizon, made really good money when I was young, 22. And then I decided a bunch of life stuff happened and I was like, I have to do something important with my life. But it made me think about it. And then that's when I opened my skateboard shop because it was like, I need to do something I care about,
Yeah.
And when I did that,
Yeah.
I dropped down like
That's what I
financially
did.
so much. And I think by doing that, that's what really made me realize like my relationship with money didn't matter to me.
Yes.
It was just
Because now you
purely
can
a
be
tool.
creative.
Yeah, and
you
then
let go of that part.
It's like the financially a lot of people think of it as part of their status or something. Like it matters to them more than I think it should. For me, it just became a tool of like, okay, what are the things that I want to achieve or that I want to get or whatever? How much money do I need specifically for that one thing? I'm not going to have I'm not going to have money because once I have enough to have this, whatever that thing is, take the time off, or if I need to get my house or whatever the situation is, I'm going to be back to $0 in my bank account kind of regardless.
It's like trying to save enough money to move to New York. You're never going to save enough money. Just go.
Yeah.
Just move to New York, and then everything will funnel and follow you because you've already done this thing that obviously was your calling, and you go and you make it happen and you figure it out. And the figuring it out part is the process, and it's always the adventure.
What I found when I'm like trying to figure things out is it tends to go a lot easier than I was expecting. I think because I build it up in my mind to be something a lot harder than it is. Oh. And I have like a love-hate relationship with the idea of not comparing yourself to others, because I think you shouldn't compare yourself to others as far as like you'll never be happy. But on the other side of the coin, one thing that's really helped motivate me and made me accomplish a lot of things is by going, well, if that person can do this thing, I gotta think I can too.
Yeah,
like, why,
or you
you
can take that idea of comparing yourself to just being inspired by.
Yeah.
So if you're attracted to this person in some way or any way, they're in your lives, they're in front of your face, they've somehow entered into that moment. Take that energy and turn it into what is inspiring, or what don't I want to do with this moment that's being presented to me.
Yeah.
And then grab that and run with it.
Yeah. I mean, like if I look at things with my artwork, how fast things developed just because I was like, oh, I just really want to do this thing and I don't care if people don't like it. Yeah. It just developed really, really quickly versus other things. If I like want it to be so polished, even just as like not doing video for the show for a really long time, it was like, I don't want to do video for this because I don't want it to look bad. I feel like I developed the sound of it and the whole show the way I wanted to.
Even if it does look bad, who cares?
Yeah, and how quickly
you got to make some bad stuff. You make some good stuff. Artists, they need to make bad work, and they'll end up making good work, and they also need time to not make work.
Sure.
So,
how did you develop this style that you're currently going on? What were the bad times with developing it? Did it take a long time to figure that out? Is there a lot of work you did that you look back on and cringe? Or?
I just think that my stuff is always growing. It's never stagnant. I can't keep shooting the same thing over and over and over. So I think like this backdrop stuff, yes, I've been shooting it for like say 11 years, but it's now morphing into something else where I'm a photographer. I'm not going to work with a gallery. I'm not going to do editions. There's no rules anymore. I've decided for myself.
Yeah.
So there's no rules. This is what I'm going to do. Except I do kind of want to make, because it's photography, I want to make something that's not reproducible. I want to do a one of a kind. And how do you do that when you print?
Right.
So this is a fine line, and I haven't done it yet, but I need to, those children's books, they're like they're for like toddlers.
Yeah. And
they're like 7 pages because each page, it's thick. Like you touch it.
Yeah.
Like there's this bunny rabbit. Oh, he's fuzzy.
Yeah.
And then a lot of my work is very childlike with a dark side.
Sure.
And I find that as my happy place.
Yeah.
Like I like playful things.
Yeah.
Like when I create it, it's playful for me, and that's my happy place. So I was thinking the print is going to become something else, something that I can, after it's printed, because I do print on canvas a lot, I can alter that and I can create something that makes that exact print a one of a kind. So that's my next venture where, as a photographer, I can, I don't know. It's a fine line to fuck with prints.
Yeah.
So you could really mess it up.
Yeah,
And
well-
I'm a traditionalist. I mean, I was raised with not raised. I was taught in the film, like, you do silver gelatin, you do not touch a print after it's done.
Sure.
So here I go. We'll see.
Yeah, see, I ruin prints, but of photos that aren't good that I take by painting on them, because that's what got me into painting. Was this artist Luca Buffo? He's like a French artist who's a skateboarder, and he's involved in the skate industry and stuff. He's done graphics for a bunch of stuff, but he also is in the art world and just does a lot of things. But he started painting, I think he was like 26 or something, on like Vice magazines and Thrashers and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And just like would paint little characters on the covers of these magazines, and then just like sent them to all the magazines, like, I did these, thought you might like them. And then his career just kind of like took off from that.
There's a collection.
Yeah,
Boom.
so that's what inspired me to start painting in the first place. So to this day, my biggest struggle is I hate painting backgrounds because I only want to paint the character interacting with the thing.
Yeah.
So I like to take pictures and then paint a character on the picture.
Love it.
And that's transferred into me painting murals of like, what is the wall where it's at? How can this character fit? So like at Banbury
Look at how
Place,
that
Eau Claire.
grew.
Right, yeah, exactly. How that kind of went in that direction. But I already ruined them by painting them. Are you going to think about painting them, or are you trying to do like
Don't
texture,
say you
texture?
ruined them. You didn't ruin them. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just saying, going to art school in 1992, you know, like I was just taught by old school traditional professors, and I learned old school traditional photography.
Yeah,
Things are completely different today.
sure.
So, I mean, it's another world, and that's why I say there are no rules.
Sure.
And how are we going to find where we're going if we don't just go?
I think you constantly have to adjust. I mean, one thing I talk about with people a lot with like how college and school is in general these days is the world is evolving at such a fast pace, way faster than it ever has before. I think about even when I was a kid versus my kid's age. Like my oldest one is 10.
Okay.
And I think about what life looks like for her versus when I was 10.
20
Like when I
years
was
ago.
10, like the internet wasn't a thing. Like it wasn't prevalent at all. I think YouTube came out when I was like 13 or 14. You know what I mean? So
And I'm
social
52.
media certainly wasn't a thing. Like that didn't even exist in the world. Versus
When I
now.
graduated college, literally the year I graduated college, there was this thing called email. And I was like, email? Like, but doesn't that mean that if you send something digitally, the other person has to have a computer?
Yeah. I remember
So-
I mean, I'm not going to go down a whole rabbit hole talking about that. But
Yeah,
I remember,
I know.
like,
We all know.
text messages going like, why would you ever text? Calling so much faster, blah, blah, blah. Going back, though, the things that you learn, I think if you get stuck in the past of how things used to work, you're going to be left in the past.
Yep.
Right? But there are going to be a lot of people that come up that totally ignore that because they missed it entirely, and then they're kind of missing something from their tool belt. What parts of that you learned back then are still helpful and relevant to your work now?
Oh, I love my traditional training.
What,
In fact, what's that?
what parts of it specifically do you still pull in
Well,
from?
in like the early 90s, I lived in the dark room.
Okay.
I lived in there, and I said to myself, like, I'm in there, I'm doing my hands-on thing, and I'm watching things come to life, and it's just such a slower process back then. I would say to myself, oh, Shelly, if you don't, like, get in the dark room later in life, you better just take a step back. Take a look at yourself, because there's definitely something wrong.
Sure.
And I gathered, after I graduated, I have had 3 dark rooms since then, and they just kind of slowly. And now I accept the fact that I'm not doing that now, but I still embrace and hold very close to my heart the way that I can see images by being able to print them color, chrome, black and white, mural, all of that. I was able to do that myself, so I can see images in the way that I see images today.
Sure. Well, and I think it develops a closer relationship with what it is. And I think that's the case with anything. Even
Yeah,
with like my show.
it really did bring me close.
Editing every part of it
Yeah,
makes me more
exactly.
aware of everything that I'm doing going into it.
Yeah.
Versus if I just outsource something, you know what I mean? Then I'm only seeing part of the picture, not the entire picture.
Just drowning yourself and surrounding yourself in the things that you love.
What do you think the big advantage is, if there is any, I'm sure there is, of people still doing film?
Shooting film?
Yeah, because pop and thing in Eau
I
Claire.
do-
There's a lot of people that do.
I mean, it's a little pricey, but hey, I just said it's the process. And when you slow down the process, you're going to see things differently. You're going to experience them differently. You're going to learn differently. And what's wrong with that? I mean, that's great.
Sure.
It's just, things are moving so fast these days. So I think you can mix that in with things that move. Slow and fast. What am I trying to say? Slowing it down is a good thing.
Sure. So if you had to suggest, if somebody who's like getting into photography now, do you think that would be a helpful side quest of theirs to like put some time and
for
energy
sure.
into that,
Yeah.
just to see what the experience is like?
Process your own film. Chemicals are chemicals. So
Yeah.
you have that side of it.
Sure.
So be careful with the chemicals and how you dispose of them. You got to be, everybody's really conscious these days.
Yeah.
So you make that choice on how you want to move forward and shoot film. I think Ilford is the only thing making paper and film these days.
Sure.
So the limitations are much greater now, but they're still there. So if you want to experiment with it, go for it. Grab the Brownie and the 120 film.
Sure.
And look at it that way. And you can decide how you want to collaborate with what is going to be created in the future. I still have my original film camera. It's not worth anything to anyone but me.
Right. Sure.
Actually, might still be a roll in there. But I bought another camera specifically for its long exposure natural light quality. And I won't use it because I light everything. Everywhere I go, I'm lighting it.
Sure.
I have to have strobe. But I'm like, maybe I want to do natural light again. So it's like the most expensive camera I ever bought. So now I have to train myself, and I bought it for a reason, to force myself to shoot natural light again. So we'll see where that brings me. I've had it for almost 5 years, and I've barely shot with it.
Sure. Is it because what I've found with myself is when you get however good, relatively good at whatever that thing is, people, it's like embarrassing to be horrible at something when you're already fairly good at something. So like for me with painting as an example, right? For what I do, I think I'm pretty good at specifically that. However, like if I had to do a portrait of somebody, it would be embarrassingly bad. It would be horrible. So I just tend to like never really go in that direction because I just know it's going to be bad, and it pushes me away from doing it.
There's that brain chatter thing we were talking about earlier.
Is that what's happening with you as far as not choosing to spend more time using that camera? Is it because you're just like, I know what else I'm working on is going to be my vision? What's holding you
because
back?
I always have to have more than one style going on to keep myself inspired and to keep myself interested. And my gut says there is something to shoot with this camera. So what? It's almost been 5 years.
Sure.
I'm sure it'll come.
Yeah.
So it'll reveal itself. I'm still testing it out. But the reason I bought it is because digital motion is ugly as hell, personally. Because I shoot film still. In a long exposure, the motion is beautiful and milky in the grain and everything. So the Leica SL2, I'm not going to get gear here. I'm not talking about gear, but it's the only digital camera that you can have a long exposure and have motion and it looks like film. The Leica shoots like film, and that's why I bought it.
Sure.
So that's me going back to my film days, and I'm like, I want something that looks like film.
Yeah.
So
Well,
we'll see.
The way technology is advancing, all of those types of things are going to become available anyways. It's like, I was talking to somebody about records the other day, and they were saying how any new album that's produced, that's put on a record, is just a gimmick. And they were talking about it. I'm not pretending to be an expert about it, but they were explaining to me that like the way that this album is recorded in the first place and produced and engineered is all digital. So it's just a different type of beast when then you transfer it over versus like original records. The way it was produced was meant to be on a record to begin with. So there is an advantage to listening to it that way versus listening to something new. It wasn't produced that way. So listening to it that way is not really giving you any sort of real benefit. I don't know if that's true, but I'm just saying that like as things change, it's like the technology is advancing where it makes a lot of things obsolete, not 100%. And a lot of times even just from the personal experience you gain from it, even if you don't use those images, that still has its own value. It'll
have its value, and it may not even be right away. It might be later. It might be 10 years later, but the older you get, 10 years is like 2 months. So
Yeah, yeah. When you start to change direction with what you're doing, there's a little bit of that like fear, obviously, of not being good at it in general, but then there's also that fear of the people that currently like what you do. Are they going to still like anything that you do? Do you kind of run into that with as you want to develop these other directions of like, well, right now I have clients reaching out that want this work. Is that going to fade if I go in a different direction? Does that hold you back at all? Or what's your thought process with that?
Maybe 20 years ago,
Sure.
I would think like that. And when I was thinking like that, social media was at its peak and I could get instant feedback. To be honest, I don't know where I would be without all the instant feedback, because we want to be liked and we want to be noticed and we want to just rock it,
Yeah.
right? So at this point, I don't know if it just comes along with being a 50-year-old woman, but you just really don't care.
Sure. Yeah.
You just kind of like I'm very secure in my visions, and I know the rewards that I get through going through my process, and the rewards that always by creating in the way that I create, I will end up where I want to be, even if you don't know where you want to be. Believe me, you'll be happy when you get there.
Yeah. What's an example? What's a story of something that you're really grateful for that was really rewarding that came because of your work?
My work, I guess.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have a vision for what I would be creating or how I would be creating it. And then when I just, like I said, keep your eye on the ball, don't look down, look forward, don't look to the side, look forward. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in this place where you like literally give yourself a pat on the back and you're like, cool, well, let's try that again. Or let's go in this direction and recreate everything I just did. I don't know where I'm going, and then it turns into a little bit of an addiction.
Sure.
Actually, in a good way.
Yeah.
Not like a hardcore addiction, but something where it keeps, you just are always wanting to not be stagnant. Yeah. And growing. And it's how I have found where if I'm always growing, even to however old I get, that's my happy place. And when you're in your happy place, everything else around you is the same. And that's that manifestation we were talking about. Yeah. So you just keep that stuff centered and everything around you reflects that.
It's funny how much positive mental attitude can like change everything, because it changes everything around you too.
Yes,
it's
it
like
does.
all the other people, the positivity is infectious. If you're excited about this project, this other person gets excited about the project. It could be like you could have the example of the one picture being presented in two different ways, and then people like it or hate it, just depending on how you talk about it in the first place. So a lot of people, like I know some
and that's their reaction to it, and that's okay. They like it, they hate it. Cool.
Well, I mean, the thing is not everyone's going to like it kind of regardless. Right. Like that's not really possible to have.
And I'm not doing it for everyone.
Yeah. Well,
most of it. I love it when they contribute and become a part of it. That's the end goal, is to be able to share it and create community around it. And then it moves you into the next.
What, have you found, because I mean, I think this is a common thing, but when you try to please other people or you try to create what you think that they want, it never really reaches them. Like I hit that with commissions, or a lot of artists don't like doing commissions because they're like, I can't see in your brain what you think you want, and then you have to try to make it. You know what I mean? Versus being able to do something freely to create what you want. When you're working with those people, do you like just take their feedback but really do what you want and hope that they like it, or how
exactly
does it work?
And like, there's kind of an understanding, at least my clients, where they come to me to do my thing. And a lot of them will say that, but also I'm not in advertising. I'm not, I'm in art. Yeah. So these people are coming to me for their own home, or they're coming to me for their restaurant or their hotel or their condominium, like lobby. Mm-hmm. And they like what I've had. They want me to create something like that for them.
How do you continue to develop something that you are kind of on your own? Because when you grow something, you can, there's people above you that you look up to, and you're like, how this person's doing this. I want to get better at doing this thing. And you can always pull from different people anyways. But when you become known for doing your own thing, how do you then continue to improve upon something that you're the only one really doing that?
Improving or growing, kind of the similar things.
Sure.
Like I said, doing the exact same thing, I always wanted to change it up a little bit. Then I just try to figure out how that is going to happen and what that actually means. Like I said earlier, like right now I'm doing my backdrop thing, and I do a lot of different series, but my heart right now is in color.
Sure.
Though I love my black and white, but it's so easy for me. Let's create a challenge. Mm-hmm. There we go. I'm creating my own challenges, and I'm seeing how I'm going to get there and how it's going to be completed. And how did that work out? And then you figure it out.
What works better for you? Changing something small, like starting kind of at the same base and just trying to make little changes, so that way this project's a little bit different, the next one's a little bit different, and then when you look 6 projects ago, we're like way different. Do you find more success doing that, or do you find more success trying to do something totally different from the beginning?
So if I'm working on a series, that will grow in pieces, and then sometimes if I'm going to do a change, I'm going to start a whole new series. So it'll be completely different. The subjects are different. It's a completely different style, because I also have like a cinematic style where I'm inspired by films, and beautifully shot, gorgeous cinema. And I want to create a scene out of a film. So there's that kind of series. And then there's, my black and white gritty stuff, that's just so simple and easy for me. For me, if I need to just kind of like a dog shaking off a lot of water, and I just got to go out and create 50 photos in a day. It's a really easy way to do it. And it just feels good. It's like loosening you up. You feel like you need to just... So I have different styles that fulfill different needs that I have for myself to keep inspiration going.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
So technology obviously advances really quickly, and people coming up now, even just the simple fact of like with my phone, I could take a picture of you, and as far as for social media, that kind of like works enough. Right. Like it does enough.
Get so that background black or whatever.
The basic levels of cameras are becoming more financially accessible. Colleges now rent them out more, whatever. In general, it's more accessible to be able to get into photography. How important is it to be able to develop something that's totally your own as far as being able to build a career? How important, obviously that's incredibly important to you, but as far as somebody who even wants to get into photography in the first place at this point, like how do they go about that? How important is it? I was
forced to find my style pretty quick because I was so used to not having any competition. Then digital happened. Right. Internet, digital, Photoshop just keeps growing. Oh, heck, now I can just AI that, you know? So I didn't know it at the time, but I really needed to be out of the water with all those other fish. I needed to be a bright red fish amongst all the blue ones. Yeah. Or whatever. I just felt that need because it's soul sucking for me to be the same. So.
And it's a stark comparison then against everyone else because they're doing the same stuff. Right.
Right. But they're also learning. So I got a little ahead of the game, maybe. Sure. But also I graduated college without knowing how to turn on a computer.
Sure. Yeah. But I think
I was like, a JPEG, what's that?
That gives a different kind of advantage though, because it's like I said, it's just a different look. You're kind of looking at the whole thing from a different lens, like me going into creating the show 4 years ago when I started, I went from a different lens than a lot of people do because I had already owned a business. So I kind of knew how to promote a product and do the whole business. Yeah. And I kind of approached it as a business rather than just like a side little thing that I was doing. Yeah. And because of that, it was able to be successful in this kind of way. So your different experiences that you have contribute in different ways.
Yeah. You stay true to yourself as well, and that's going to help develop your style. It's not good. Nobody else will be able to copy it really.
Yeah, but it's hard because when you try to do something that nobody else is doing that is just you, it's a huge leap of faith of like, is anyone even going to really like what I'm doing at all?
Right.
Like,
There's that question that keeps popping up, but don't start with that question. Right. That's a really hard place to begin, because it's like not about everybody else, it's about you, and it's your style, not everybody else's style. You can be inspired, but you collect everybody else's style and then you morph it into yourself, and that's where your style comes out. And I can guarantee that it'd be accepted with open arms because it's honest.
Yeah.
And that's what makes good art.
I think so too. To get to that point though, you still have to build yourself up to be something. Do you think that it's, well, I think it's hard because there's so many people out there that even if you create something great, say you start an Instagram profile right now, right? Social media or whatever, you live, it doesn't matter where you live, and you create something great and you just put it out, if no one's going to see it yet. So you have to kind of like get people to see it in the first place, which is why all these relationships you build with people, and why like through social media, you kind of grow things to a point where like when you put something out, people are going to see it. They're either going to identify with it or not. But at the beginning, no one's going to see it in the first place.
Except, people, your peers and the people around you. And that is helpful as well.
Yeah, but I think to build a career, a lot of times people have to kind of do something such as weddings, right? For quite a while, just to build like a client list and build their own skills and understand how everything works. And then they can kind of transition where 90% of their income is coming from these things that they know they're getting paid for, that kind of pays for their whole, like a lot of people do weddings through the summers. So that way in winters, one of my friends, he just goes out snowboarding in Colorado and takes photos that he just wants to.
A lot of people don't get married in the winter too. It slows down.
Right. But I mean, do you think that that's still the route to go for people if they want to be able to build a living off of it, is to start in that direction?
When I was shooting weddings, I consider, not only, I was like the same age as my clients. I was going to a party every weekend.
Sure.
I was having a blast, and they were all great people, and I considered it just constant practice.
Yeah.
And my eye was just being sharpened and sharpened and sharpened, and I'm looking and I mean, I enjoyed it. So I really it was just practice all the time. I mean, I was going through, I was shooting film, and I would go through, I shot a brick was 50, almost 1,000, and you had to edit by actually printing them into 4x6 and then literally throwing them in the garbage.
Wow.
That was editing.
Sure. Yeah.
So, it's just another way to see and practice, and always be having a camera and like boom, boom, boom. So, and then editing, I'm the fastest I know. I don't know if it was because I was literally throwing it in the garbage.
Yeah, I mean, practice makes perfect, right? 30 years, you're obviously going to get better at it. How do you avoid getting stuck in that hole? Because people will do something like that, of getting into a comfortable living that they make. They're good at this thing.
Oh,
but they
as
don't
soon as
necessarily
you
love
do,
it.
it'll change.
The world will tell you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know any freelancer who is just making the same bank for 10 years, no, it's not going to happen. So you can be, you can count on that.
Yeah.
There's going to be flux for sure. But as soon as you're like, oh, this is the best, something will happen, and it'll be like, boosh. Oh, well, I guess I got to figure this out now.
Yeah.
So
I was talking to this bass guitarist, Ian Allison, out of Minneapolis. He does a bunch of session work and stuff. And he was telling me, I think this is the right conversation I'm remembering, but he was telling me that what he does is he just goes with whatever in the moment feels cool. Like whatever gives him that feeling of like, that would be really cool. I want to do that. So he just does that kind of regardless. And I think that like after he said that, it kind of clicked with me of, the universe is like telling you something. I'm not like religious, but spiritual in the way of like, if something feels right, it's probably right.
Yeah, he's not in his head. He's in his gut.
Yeah.
And his heart. And those are like always right.
That's seriously though.
Brain just messes it up.
Yeah, that's what I've learned. If you can ask people for advice left and right, whatever. But I always tell people you should go with your gut 100% of the time, regardless of what people say. Because even if you end up being wrong, at least you'll understand why, and you only can blame yourself, and you'll feel better about it because you'll learn from it. Versus if you take somebody else's advice, they're wrong. You're not even learning from it, but and you're pissed off.
You can be inspired by it, or be like, I'm going to learn to not do that.
Yeah.
Advice. So, yeah. But I really do think that guts are rarely wrong.
I have not experienced any time where I went with my gut and regretted it. That hasn't happened once in my life. So we'll see what ends up happening with everything moving forward. But I think I'm on the right path, and I think you're on the right path. So thank you so much for letting me into your studio and hanging out with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was really fun.
I appreciate it. This is cool being able to share. I mean, the fact you've been doing it as long as you have and really built, like, it's not like you have focused on social media to build this like huge presence, but a lot of people have seen your work. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that are like, I would love to know more of the story behind that work, just like me. So it's nice when I can do an interview that purely is me being curious going into it. And that's awesome. Like the only reason that I do it. I love to do those interviews. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for coming over.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.